Which build is right for you in the Path of Exile as a beginner of the game, or maybe a returning player who has been away for long enough and has forgotten all the basics and is not really on top of the latest and greatest? Well, in this video I would like to share with you my personal opinion, my view on the 8 really staple kind of builds that are very popular in Path of Exile and permutations of those builds that are popular in Path of Exile these days in 2021, for you to maybe choose something that would work for you as a new player, as a beginner of Path of Exile. Stick around, let's talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Gyro. Today we're talking about the best builds of Path of Exile. This video was made for Ultimatum League 3.14 of Path of Exile, but all of my builds, all of my links are being updated for every subsequent league. So if you're watching this video far into the future, please check the PoB Path of Building links to these builds in the description of the video and you will get the updated ones. Why am I going to show to you these particular 8 builds? Because I find them personally all very fun in their own way. I have also some of the guides that will take you all the way to the start of the mapping end game for these builds, and others I have an early so-called vector build guides, which means that they are not complete and they won't take you all the way to the end game, but will give you a good idea and a direction to start your adventures in before doing further research perhaps and diving deeper. As I said, links to all of these builds are in the description of this video, and if you don't want to hear my summaries for each build that are coming up in a second, just use the timeline chapters of the video to skip to the section that you are in fact interested in. With this summary out of the way, let's start looking at our very first contender for your attention, Summoner Witch builds. Summoners are quite different, can be quite different builds, with some perhaps investing very heavily into boosting the power of the zombies, meat shields, while others diversify into raging spirits, phantasms, golems and specters, as my particular build does that I have a build guide for on my channel. If you aren't familiar with summoner builds in general, those are, well, what you think they are. You summon many creatures that kill stuff for you, in a nutshell. Often that leads to very passive and quite satisfying gameplay in its own way, of you basically taking your dogs for a walk, for a lack of a better word, and standing back while they kill all the baddies for you. If this sounds like your cup of tea, in principle, I do recommend watching my Summoner Witch guide videos, links to which, as always, are in the description below this video. Now, Witch Elementalist. It is more of a traditional witch variant that you'd picture your spellcasters to be like. Witch relies on a particular lightning spell, it's called Arc, that very conveniently chains between the enemies, shocking and disintegrating them as you quickly dash across the screen. Witch gameplay is very easy and very satisfying, but in this case it's up to you to kind of do all the dirty work, killing baddies, and boosting your casting speed and spell damage as massively as you can, repeating spells as much as you can, and having a couple of golems running around if you can do that too. My easy Witch build is here for you if you're after a beginner-friendly direction rather than anything too fancy and high-end game tested. Now, Cyclone Duelist, a famous Path of Exile equivalent of the Diablo's Whirlwind Barbarian, if you know what I'm talking about. A very fun way to play if you don't mind melee range and generally relying on your avoidance and letting your bleeds and impale effects kill the enemies before they kill you, while you whirlwind or cyclone through them at high speed. When I played Path of Exile years ago, before diving for a long time into World of Warcraft almost exclusively, Cyclone builds were my main builds of choice. I thought they were most fun back then. Then Grinding Gear Games, creators of Path of Exile, nerfed Cyclone ability quite a bit, which is when I remember switching to other builds, to summoner builds personally. This is absolutely not to say that Cyclone is not good these days. It still is, and it still is a lot of fun. It just, in my opinion, requires more involved and dedicated building efforts than many beginners would probably want to invest upfront, beyond leveling and maybe early endgame. If you want to push endgame, in my humble opinion, there are better and easier builds to do that with. For example, our next contender, Crash Marauder, a very fun and a lot more sturdy melee build. If you feel like being close and personal to your opponents, yet Duelist is not feeling solid enough to you or hitting far enough for your liking. Not a problem with Crash Marauder, because that build might scratch your itch better then, so you should give it a shot. You will basically run around slamming the ground and killing the mobs with huge icicles that are bursting from the ground around you. Not many things can be better than that, let me tell you, if you are after some melee range carnage. Now, Rain of Arrows Ranger. Probably one of the easiest, most straightforward and basic builds to create as a real newbie of Path of Exile. There is nothing wrong with that when you're just learning the basics. I won't go as far as saying this is one of the strongest builds, because I honestly don't think it is. But like I said already, if you're a beginner and if you like just simply optics of a girl character combined with very easy, almost self-guiding key ability to use, Rain of Arrows, inflicting physical range damage amplified by the bleed effects that completely destroy everything on the screen with only a few shots, this might be your build. I'll warn you straight away though that I found this build a little flat from about mid-game for myself personally, and I also found it very squishy, especially on boss arenas where the areas are limited, where there is nowhere to run and keep your distance. I know that any build can be made more tanky with certain investment of the points, but I just test things, have fun with them for as long as I can, and I call it honestly for what it is, and then move on to other builds. That's a fun way for me to play, and I kind of make no apologies for it. I'm just warning you here. So Ranger is not my favorite, but it has its pluses without a shadow of a doubt, hence this, let's call it an honorable mention, and a build link in the description. Now, Nova Templar Hierophant. Probably the best map clearer in my collection so far. Very satisfying to play, cold-based, grandpa friendly build. Shoot tons and tons of frost bolts and accompany those with a machine gun repeating ice novas to freeze and destroy everything on the screen. It's really awesome and highly recommended build for newbies and even slightly more advanced players too, who might not have tried this build before. Now, Toxic Rain Shadow Trickster, a very popular build, and I am doing my version of it right now. This is a build in progress for me, and it's very enjoyable already. It's an easy build that I will definitely publish a video about soon enough, when I feel like I got a proper taste for it, which usually happens around me finishing the main campaign and starting what is known as the end game mapping. Bow and arrow based build on a Trickster character chassis, shooting arrows into the sky and seeing toxic pods of yucky, fast growing stuff contaminating the area and killing everything. What's not to like, right? I think it's lovely, and I think you might think so too. Like the video, by the way, right now, if you agree with me and if you do like it. Finally, in our little collection, Essence Drain Contagion Trickster. An interesting alternative variant of the Shadow Trickster build I decided to level and test almost side by side with my Toxic Rain Shadow. Except this guy doesn't need a bow and an arrow and relies on applying Contagion Curse in an area and then shooting Essence Drain that then spreads with the help of Contagion across vast, potentially distances, killing everything with chaos damage in the process. Additional fun and non-standard bit of this build that I almost like more than the core mechanic there is that there is a Bane channeled spell that does chaos damage and increases chaos damage taken by your targets, especially useful for bosses, which is smartly powered by a totem that is also doubled up by a support gem. So it's really cool and quite fun to use, to be honest with you, but feels like a very, very different type of gameplay. But hey, if you are getting bored with your basic, I don't know, ground slam or ice Crash Marauder or whatever it is else that's been tickling your fancy to this moment, you might want to subscribe for more videos from me and wait until I publish a proper Essence Drain Trickster guide for you. So to wrap this up, which build is right for you? Well, it's quite subjective, isn't it? It's not for me to say, as everyone is different and likes to play the game quite differently. Are there more builds than these ones in Path of Exile? Well, absolutely. Path of Exile is an awesome game and it has many, many more build permutations thanks to the massive passive skills tree and lots of gems that give you different abilities. Those abilities, they work together or synergize, if we use a fancy word here, which is usually what lays the foundation for these and many other builds that you can find on mine and other channels. But I do hope that I've given you a good, casual-friendly overview of some staple builds that cover a lot of ground in Path of Exile gameplay-wise, really. So maybe there is something for you to choose from here. If not, please don't be shy and do let me know in the comments down below what kind of gameplay do you prefer. Or perhaps a build that you might have even heard of or seen on YouTube somewhere else, but it was maybe too difficult for you and you couldn't understand it. And maybe I'll be able to break it down and come up with my own noob-friendly simplified version that I'll be, you know, most happy to produce and test for both of us, and we might both benefit from this and play and have some fun. So please do like the video if you did enjoy this, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you very much once again for watching, and I'll be speaking with you soon enough next time.